and the recording, perfect, we're recording, to our webpage and circulating that to our registrants following the event. So keep an eye out for those materials. The recordings and the slides from our first 2 sessions on mobile charging manufacturers are also live on our webpage. So if you missed those opportunities, please check out those resources. And then lastly, if you would like to take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where you're coming from. I think we have a pretty big audience today, so it'd be great to get to know each other a little bit more. And then lastly, like I said earlier, we will end the session with a Q&A. So as questions arise, please pop those into the Q&A box. And this is a separate function from the chat function, and will just allow us to track the questions closely to make sure that we raise them to our panelists at the end here. All right, we can hop into our slides now. In terms of our agenda, we'll start with an introduction to MassCEC, and then we'll dive into our mobile charging solutions pilot program. Next, we'll hear more about our technology inventory, and then we'll get into our mobile charging panel featuring CalStart, Exos Trucks, and Electric Fish. And then lastly, we will end with our Q&A session. So again, as questions arise, please get them into our Q&A box. So what is MassCEC and what does our work look like? We are a quasi-state economic development agency with the dual goals of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and accelerating clean energy and climate tech innovation across the Commonwealth. Our work spans across 4 focus areas, starting with accelerating decarbonization. This is where I sit on the clean transportation team and where we are running the mobile charging solutions pilot program. We also have emerging climate tech, large-scale deployment of offshore energy, and lastly, clean energy and climate workforce development. For your awareness, I'd also like to take a quick moment to share a note on the funding source for this program. In 2024, the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Coordinating Council, also known as the EVIC, awarded MassCEC $38 million to run a couple pilot programs with the goal of increasing access to EV charging infrastructure across the Commonwealth. And when conceptualizing these pilots, the EVIC identified mobile charging as a promising technology that can help fleet owners electrify without the need for immediate large-scale investment in charging infrastructure. So in launching our mobile charging pilot program, our goal is to support the electrification of fleets lacking access to traditional charging infrastructure and to share these lessons learned with the EVIC to hopefully scale these technologies and make them more available to fleets across the Commonwealth. Diving into our mobile charging solutions program a little bit more, we will accelerate the electrification of 4 medium and heavy duty fleets through the deployment of mobile charging stations. In terms of our program goals, we are aiming to increase access to mobile charging technologies and reduce barriers to EV adoption for fleets across the state. We are also piloting innovative models of mobile charging that can be scaled across the Commonwealth. And then lastly, we will publish public-facing resources to support fleet owners and operators through independent deployment projects. In terms of our program services, we are funding the deployment of mobile charging stations and zero-emission vehicles for the 4 participating fleets. These technologies will be deployed on a rolling basis until February 2026, and as of now, the program is fully enrolled. In terms of our public-facing resources, these are tools that will support future fleet owners through the independent processes when procuring and deploying mobile charging solutions. These resources will be published in December 2026, and to date, we have 1 resource live on our webpage. That is our technology inventory, and I will share a little bit more about that on our next slide. So our mobile charging solutions technology inventory, it was sort of the catalyst for this webinar series and designed by our consultant CalStart. It's a tool that introduces fleets to charging units within the mobile and semi-permanent charging industry. And it's not an exhaustive list of the entire mobile charging industry. It is a list that's exclusively featuring assets with net zero emissions. And again, the purpose of this tool was to sort of guide our fleet participants through the mobile charging unit selection process. So the technology inventory identifies available mobile charging solutions, as well as mentions their asset types, ownership models, use cases, storage capacity, grid impacts, and deployment timelines. And then lastly, the mobile charging technology inventory also does a really good job of sort of laying out the foundational knowledge for the mobile charging industry and what it offers in terms of definitions for mobile charging, definitions for mobile charging use cases, and then different models of mobile charging. So just for the sake of setting the stage here, we have our mobile charging definition, just so that everyone is aware of when we refer to mobile charging, we are referring to any type of semi-permanent, off-grid, and grid flexible charging solution that can be disconnected and transported between locations. Before handing it off to our panelists, I'm just going to take a moment to introduce them. First up, we have Madeline Brown, lead project manager from CalStart. She is leading our mobile charging pilot project in Massachusetts, as well as pilots in California. She'll share more about the mobile charging use cases and sort of need in the fleet industry, as well as sharing lessons learned from the pilots she has worked on. And then we'll have Alden Shank, director of mobile charging from Exos Trucks. He's here today to share a little bit more about the Exos hub unit, and then we'll also dive into some lessons learned from deployments. And then we have Vince Wong, co-founder and COO of Electric Fish. He will also be sharing an overview of the Electric Fish charging unit, as well as lessons learned from deployments he has worked on. And just a quick reminder before handing it over, again, as questions arise, please pop them in the question and answer box for our panelists. And with that, I will hand it over to Madeline.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Mass CEC team, for having us. I am excited to be here today to share on behalf of the Mass CEC pilot. My name is Dr. Madeline Brown. I am a lead project manager for CalStart for our San Joaquin Valley Regional Office. I had the wonderful pleasure of being brought on board to support this particular pilot with our East Coast team. Next slide, please. So a couple of disclaimers before we jump into the PowerPoint. For the various photos you're seeing, most of those are pulled from public-facing resources. So please do be sure to check in with providers if you do have any questions at any point. And then also within this presentation, we are going to talk about and see images of a variety of charging providers. And if we've included them, it's not an explicit endorsement. And if there's somebody missing, it's not an explicit snub. There are a variety of options. The market is very dynamic. So we just wanted to throw that disclaimer out there. And then last but not least for disclaimers, I love using icons. It helps me interpret messaging really quickly. And so most of those are pulled from a wonderful website called the Noun Project. So if you are not familiar with CalStart, we are not a state agency in California. We began in California 30 some odd years ago, but we're actually a nationwide and beyond nonprofit. We do most of our work stateside, but there are also global efforts, particularly a global MOU for the commercial vehicles electrification. We have 3 regional offices, including the San Joaquin Valley, a Midwest office, and the East Coast office, who are the bulk of our teammates for this project. And then CalStart is broken up across activities and initiatives, where for this pilot in particular, we are working with our data insights team, as well as our infrastructure team. So that's the lens we're looking at this project through, is data and infrastructure availability. Next. So as you may have experienced, there are challenges to accessing charging infrastructure, regardless of fleet size, whether it's a small business with 1 or 2 vehicles, all the way through major transit companies looking to electrify. We've seen a variety of roadblocks, including permanent infrastructure is expensive. It takes time. People are unsure if zero emission is going to fit their duty cycle and may be hesitant to adopt a zero emission technology. Timeline misalignments, if there are delays in infrastructure access, construction disruptions. And then something that we're seeing primarily on the East Coast are challenges with leased facilities where a fleet is interested in zero emissions, but may not be able to make permanent adjustments to their facilities. And then more on the West Coast, what we're seeing are delays in utilities. Next, please. So just some quick terms that Claire already captured. When we refer to mobile, that's something that's quick and easy to move. You can drag it around on wheels, something that's skid mount or palletized that you could quickly move with a forklift. And there's even some cart options available. And then when we think more narrowed down into semi-permanent, that's something that you can move, but aren't going to be as mobile on a day-to-day basis. So we've seen some neat solutions that are overhead on piles drilled into the ground that still haven't required major permitting or groundbreaking. And then there are also large-scale containerized solutions that are embedded within a shipping container. Also for today, we're very specifically talking about zero emission, where no additional emissions are added to an area. So we're not specifically looking at where a power source is coming from. We're just not going to be adding any more emissions. So these resources can include hydrogen powered, grid connected. You can daisy chain different units together to existing charging and also use solar. So those are the majority of fuel types for zero emission. Next. All right. So I've alluded to it a little bit. Right about the same time in the industry, HVIP in California, which is an incentive program for medium and heavy duty vehicles, and Massachusetts Clean Energy Center are both trying to address the challenge of fleets waiting for charging infrastructure or having limited access. And as I mentioned, for Mass CEC, we're seeing quite a few fleets who have leased facilities that want to engage in zero emissions, but can't be busting out a jackhammer to break up the concrete. Whereas in California with the HVIP pilot, fleets were wanting to bring on vehicles that they had vouchers for, but they couldn't start using the vehicles until they had charging infrastructure. So in California, it began as more of a stopgap, and then Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, more of a longer term tool to address that leased approach. Go ahead. So just quick recap. For both pilots, we've had 4 fleets with a little bit of nuance in the types of assets we can use. With the Mass CEC project, it was a little more flexible and has included charging as a service, lease, lease to own, and full ownership, versus the California pilot where it was lease only. Next. All right, so the good stuff. Right off the bat, we've had awesome applicable lessons learned. The California pilot began a little bit before Mass CEC, so we were able to take those lessons learned to help shape out the Mass CEC pilot. Right off the bat, the big win is that by having access to mobile and semi-permanent charging, fleets can still operate. People can still move their goods where they need to go. In California in particular, we have a drayage fleet, and then we also have an armored vehicle fleet that is moving money around. So they did not have to stop, have to reroute, and have minimized their downtime. Fleets are able to integrate these solutions very smoothly. In some instances, there was already some charging on site, but it was undersized. And so they were able to expand while keeping their operations up and running. Units have been so tremendously reliable. It's really exciting to see because a lot of mobile and semi-permanent solutions can come with battery storage. You circumvent challenges that you might have if the actual electric infrastructure is down. We have not yet quantified emissions reduction, but those will be coming soon through the Mass CEC pilot, and we're really excited to put the numbers behind what we're seeing. And in the California pilot, there was only one out of literally thousands of charging sessions where the charger didn't behave properly, and it was a simple software update. So the minute that was able to be corrected, they were back up and running. And then something else that's a little bit harder to measure is driver or operator experience. A big barrier to successful implementations of zero emissions can be anxiety or fear around changing systems that may already be working, particularly for drivers. And so by offering access to assets on a temporary basis or semi-permanent basis, there's less stress for going straight into something that's in the ground. And it's really supportive of that paradigm shift to help people understand that zero emission vehicles can work and are often more positively received in how they handle. And you can't have a positive experience with a new vehicle if you can't charge that vehicle. So it's a major stepping stone. All right, next. So the three topics I'll deep dive a little bit more into are just three themes that we think will help prepare fleets in their adoption and thinking about how this may fit their particular scenarios. So we'll go ahead and step into the first one. Oh, oops, did something happened? Oh, okay. Oop. That slide was fighting me earlier too. Could we see the one with all the photos? Perfect. So fleet challenges are diverse, but so are the charging solutions. As we put together the mobile charging inventory, it was an updated iteration on our California inventory that we had. And it was so cool to see in just 6 months to a year how much the industry had evolved. So we've got units that you can actually drive the whole battery around. We've got units that are electric. There are units that are hydrogen. Some are on trailers. Some are charging as a service where somebody will come out and fill your vehicle up for you and then leave, not having to take up any space. And there are even some of those overhead solutions that we've talked about that minimize taking up a footprint. All right, now let's hop forward. Super. So this first topic is something that's happened, and you've probably seen this if you've been on other webinars. Folks will have a very fleet specific question, and the response is, it depends. So there are things that we can do as fleet owner operators that get us past it depends into more specific answers more quickly. So something that we've seen is that there can be disconnects between the fleet manager and maybe a business CEO who might be leading some of the conversations. So by spending a little bit of time just making your own kind of one pager about your own fleet, you're able to then approach the conversations with charging providers and not get generic answers. The more specific we can get with our questions, the more specific we can get with our answers. So it's worth spending some time sitting down with teammates, employees, other departments to understand, who's going to be making the contractual decisions if you choose to lease or buy a unit. How many vehicles need charging? Is that number going to change over time? What vehicles are you using now? What might you implement? And just these kind of self-reflective questions and bringing those numbers with you to have discussions. Also knowing your utility, understanding your individual circuit. For most utilities now, there are opportunities to go online and look at the capacity on your existing circuit. And then also knowing about your site's power, amps, voltage, how many phases you have at the electric connection. Next. This particular tool was designed for the pilot to help fleets navigate the decision-making. As we had seen on the slide with all of the photos, there are a ton of options, which is great because then there's a solution for everybody, but it can be overwhelming. Something that I've seen in recent past is mobile charging units, particularly like the trailer type, being able to accommodate more vehicles. So I have shifted this document a little bit, but you can start by thinking about how many vehicles do you want to charge? If you have a large fleet that you want to charge, maybe a trailer mount unit's not going to be your best option. If you have no grid connectivity, maybe you are in an off-road or off-grid environment, you might be more inclined to use a hydrogen unit. If you want to take that unit around, maybe you have different properties, a trailer could be a good fit. So these aren't the only scenarios, but it is designed to be kind of an exercise to help folks think about what might work for them. Generally speaking, there's also that scalability involved where folks can add additional units, daisy chain, or sorry, my phone's going off, or bring other resources in. Next. And then this last option we've seen, particularly in the Mass CEC pilot, is kind of this mix and match approach of being able to think about custom solutions that don't necessarily come with a custom cost. So in some scenarios, we are seeing where a fleet has existing infrastructure, but they've either had limited access because of construction, or it's now undersized because they brought additional vehicles on. So go ahead and hit next, Claire. So in that instance where there was an existing vehicle charger, the provider is able to provide a mobile unit that can be plugged into the existing charger, and then that adds on 2 more charging opportunities. In instances of insufficient grid capacity, maybe you're in a really busy commercial or industrial area and your circuit's maxed out. Go ahead and hit next, Claire. An option is bringing in a semi-permanent or palletized solution that will charge up with a battery during off-peak hours, so you can have strategic charging. A handful of options do come with those additional capabilities to do grid management. And then last but not least, if there is a business in an area where they maybe have a limited footprint because they're on a street front, or maybe their yard is just packed, there are overhead solutions now where the OEM can come out, drill piles into the ground, and then have an overhead frame, which can also be connected to a battery type unit through existing electric infrastructure. So all of these are also mix and matchable. There are a lot of really unique opportunities to charge a fleet that's experiencing challenges. And something else we've also seen is fleets moving towards using mobile or semi-permanent units permanently for the long term. Fleets are bringing on a palletized unit, and it's working really well, and there's no reason to rock the boat or pay for permanent infrastructure if something is working well. So go ahead. I think we've got just one more. So just some critical reflections. Where are you finding success or roadblocks to charging? Identifying that first barrier to entry. Do you have a leased facility? Is your fleet growing rapidly? Are you not sure what type of unit to pursue? And then we can also think of mobile charging for long-term goals. Just because it's mobile or semi-permanent doesn't mean you can't think of it as a long-term solution. We are seeing that that's a valid option. And then also something else is reflecting on what would be helpful to help an area implement mobile charging. You were seeing the pilots with Mass CEC. We're seeing like the California pilot. These are great opportunities to access data and then come up with that next iteration of questions. So I believe that's it for me today. Thank you so much. This was fun. Oh, and I'm happy
Thanks,
to take any
Madeline. We will hand it over to Exos. And yes, at the end, we will go through some questions. So thank you. It was a wonderful presentation.
Yeah, hey everyone, I'm Alden. Madeline, gosh, I think that was such a great presentation and overview of the different use cases and applications for mobile and semi-permanent charging. I think you touched on a number of different ways that we've seen our mobile charging station being deployed. And I really like your encouragement to think about mixing and matching solutions as well, because I mean, we're quick to say like our solution is great for some scenarios, but not all. But then once you start combining or finding the right fit for your particular fleet, I think there's a lot of possibility here. So just wanted to acknowledge and say thanks for such a great overview. Today my goal is to just give you a quick overview on Exos, on our hub mobile charging station, and then dive into case studies in case they spark some ideas for any of the folks who are running fleets on this call. And just, yeah, and it'll kind of be a reinforcement of what Madeline just went over. So you can go to the next slide. So for anyone who missed the earlier webinars or presentations, we're Exos, we're based in LA. We manufacture everything in Tennessee. And this is our core product. It's basically 100% electric commercial delivery vehicle. You can go to the next slide. So the fleets that we sell our vehicles to, often the big challenge for them is charging infrastructure. I think this is true for a lot of fleets that are electrifying. They'll find that permanent chargers can be kind of expensive. It's often a cost they weren't planning for or factoring in completely, or there are just more costs than they were anticipating. It can take a long time, switchgear upgrades, sometimes even putting in a new substation, permitting, all kinds of reasons. And then just flexibility, like once they're in the ground, they're in the ground. There's often not any energy storage on permanent regular chargers. So these are some of the things that we were running into with our own fleet customers that were buying our vehicles. You can go to the next slide. That's why we came up with the hub. This is a photo of the hub. It's a big metal box. It's got batteries inside. It's got chargers on the outside. It's on wheels. It doesn't have to be on wheels. The next photo will show you it doesn't have to be on wheels if you go to the next slide. So it can be skid mounted as well. But from a product concept standpoint, not super complicated here. It is a technical product, but that's basically it. So there are a couple of ways to deploy the hub. You can just leave it, I'm sorry, you can charge it up at your site and then take it to wherever you need to charge your vehicles. So that's like that mobility aspect. And then the next slide shows you the second option, which is, hey, what if you just leave it plugged in? You can leave it plugged into AC power at a building, or if you have a DC fast charging station, and Madeline touched on this, it's sort of like, it's almost like a power strip for your existing DC fast charger, right? So you can take that one charger, plug it into the hub, and now you have 4 DC fast chargers. And I will say that the 4 chargers that are on the hub, they're not, they're not bolted on from another manufacturer. Everything is made by Xos, so that results in a smaller footprint for the overall product. Also, you just call Xos if you have any support issues. Just one phone call. Okay, so you can go to the next one. Oh, this I just wanted to show like the different view of the hub. So this is showing it from like one end, and you can see you've got that CCS1 inlet for a DC fast charger on top in the middle there. There's a touch screen, and then those colorful plugs. Those are like Camlock style connectors if you want to hook up to site power or a power generation system or something like that. All right. And I think I shared this last time, but I'll touch on them again. And again, Madeline did a great job of kind of capturing what a lot of these use cases are. But this stopgap or bridge solution has been the main use case that we've continued to see for the hub. But it's interesting because that bridge solution has sometimes turned into a permanent solution or like an ongoing solution. Just as Madeline said, sometimes fleets will be like, hey, actually, this is working pretty well. Maybe I don't need to put permanent chargers in at my site. And I've got a case study that I'll share with you in a moment. Property constraints is one that we didn't really, oh, sorry if you go back. Property constraints is one that we didn't really think of when we were developing the hub, but it's been one that's been pretty common. So leased properties, you might not want to put permanent chargers on. If you're on a contaminated property, you might not be able to trench, things like that. Remote is just like taking the hub, charging vehicles elsewhere. And then these others I'll get to. So we can go ahead and dive into the case studies. So you can see some of our Xos vehicles, the step vans here. A lot of our customers who buy those vehicles are actually small to medium-sized businesses. They're independent service providers, and they deliver parcels for like FedEx, for example. And you can go to the next slide and you'll see some bullet points. So there are 2 particular ISPs in Texas. They're both relatively small. They have like 10 trucks, and they have very little site power. So they've got basically a parking lot with a little bit of power. I think it's like 240 volts, 3-phase. And what they do is they charge up the hub overnight, and then they charge up vehicles during the day. And that's nice because it allows them to avoid peak demand charges because they're charging when power is cheap. But what's interesting is like this is their only charging solution for these fleets of 10 or so vehicles. And as long as they're not planning to scale and get more vehicles, like one hub unit for 10 vehicles has been working for them. So it's just showing you like, hey, you can have a number of commercial vehicles. These are all medium duty vehicles. And if you time your operations well, like you can actually keep your fleet charged up even with just a single unit. All right, next case study, and you can just go to the next one because it's hard to read the white font on this yet. So on the other end of the spectrum, we've got a customer that is an autonomous vehicle robotaxi company. And at some of their sites, they are just doing 24/7 nonstop charging of their light duty autonomous vehicles. And by far, this customer is utilizing the Xos hub units more than any other customers that we have. It's just nonstop. And so the way that they're using the hub is they're at these charging depots, and those depots do have site power. They have AC power from the building that they're next to, and they also have some DC fast chargers installed. But what they were running into was like the amount of chargers that they had tapped into that site power, it just wasn't enough for the number of vehicles that they had to service. So they're basically doing that power strip model where they're dropping multiple hub units in, connecting to either AC power or the DC fast chargers, and it just gives them more charge heads and an energy buffer. And so I like to highlight this one because even though the hub has, a finite amount of energy storage, it has 280 kilowatt hours on the unit, because those units are plugged into grid power and they're being filled up even as they're dispensing energy to the vehicles, we're getting way more than 280 kilowatt hours from each hub unit over the course of a day. So we frequently see over 2 megawatt hours of energy in a 24-hour period. So this kind of like bumping up against the theoretical maximum of what you could do with this type of unit, but it also shows you like, yeah, you can get a lot of energy. So even with a larger fleet, depending on a number of parameters, you could keep that fleet charged up with even just a single unit. All right, yeah, so this one's kind of fun. There are a couple utilities in Florida. You can go to the next slide. And they were really thinking about the hub for hurricane season. And it's interesting because the use cases before the hurricane makes landfall and after the hurricane hits, they're really different. Before the hurricane arrives, the grid is fine. It's just that everybody's trying to leave town at the same time, right? So what they would do is they take the hub and they'd station it at key like evacuation corridors or key like highway intersections. And so people in their personal electric vehicles trying to get out of town, but they're running low on charge, they can go, and that typically the utility would station the hub next to existing charging stations and basically again turn that one charger into 4 chargers. And so they were just supporting people evacuating. After the storm hits, that's when the grid is impaired. So then the utilities would go back into the affected areas, provide electric vehicle charging to emergency response vehicles or support vehicles, things like that. And then whenever it's not hurricane season, they're still getting a bunch of use out of the hub. One of the utilities, they have like a new building that they've just constructed. That building doesn't have permanent chargers yet, so they just station the hub outside to support internal fleet vehicles and staff personal vehicles as well. And then the last case study I wanted to share is about a couple of seaports in California. Go to the next slide. Fun fact, so this forklift in the image here is manufactured by a company called Wiggins, and the electric powertrain, it's 100% electric forklift. The electric powertrain is manufactured by Exos. So the skateboard, we make that, and then they put the forklift body on that. And these are mainly used for like loading and unloading cargo from vessels. So in West Sacramento, this port, and these units were purchased by a port operator. West Sacramento had some old like charge point chargers on site, but they were just really far away from where the boats were having their cargo loaded and unloaded. And it actually was operationally infeasible for these electric forklifts to go, after a shift, burn a bunch of energy to go back to those chargers, take the time to charge up, and then burn more energy to go back to where the vessel was loading and unloading. So what they did is they just got a hub, they filled the hub up at the charge point chargers, and then they bring the hub to where the forklifts are operating. And then between shifts or while the workers are on their lunch break, they recharge the forklifts, and then those forklifts are ready to go for the next shift. And sometimes they're on 2 or 3 shifts a day. So it's pretty tight scheduling. And Long Beach is a little bit different. The charger was right next to where the forklifts are operating, but they only had enough site power to put a single DC fast charger. It had 2 charge heads, but it was just 1 charger, and they had 5 forklifts. So what they did is they got a stationary hub. They just put it on a skid, no trailer, because they're like, we're not really going to need to move this. And then they take one of those charge heads from the DC fast charger, plug it into the hub. Now that is 4. And then so those 4 plus the 1 remaining charge head, now they have a 1-to-1 vehicle to charger ratio. And so that is now their ongoing charging solution for this. So those are the different case studies I wanted to share. There are lots of others, but hopefully that sparks some ideas for you and kind of reinforces many of the points that Madeline was making about how these can add a bunch of flexibility. So last couple of slides here. I wanted to share that in addition to the current model, that 280 kilowatt hour model, we've got some new variants coming out next year. It's going to be a small, medium, large, and then possibly a faster charging model as well that will do like maybe 200 kilowatts or higher. And then we've also got sort of like this energy sort of like battery powered generator model that will be coming out, and it will not be a dedicated EV charging station, and it'll have some bidirectional capabilities as well. So just kind of mentioning these in case they spark ideas for the future. And then finally, you've got a QR code if you want to scan for the Hub 1 pager. We'll have some product specs on it. And then there's my contact information if you want to follow up and ask any other questions for that too. So that's what I had. Yeah, and there's this on here too. Sorry about the formatting on this page, but yeah, all of this I can provide to you afterwards if needed.
Excellent.
Thanks,
Thank you so
everyone.
much, Alden. It's really fantastic to hear about such a diverse range of case studies. So now we will hand it over to Vince from Electric Fish.
Great. Thanks so much, Claire. Thanks everybody for making time to listen about Electric Fish today. For those of you who joined last time's webinar, we'll be diving deeper this time into a specific case study of a project where we were able to overcome some very significant grid constraints and ultimately get them up and running with some very high performance fast charging. If we move to the next slide. Electric Fish, I'm one of the co-founders and the COO. We've been around for about 5 years at this point. We're based in both the Bay Area in California and also in Detroit. And we've had the pleasure of working with some really amazing partners spanning from utilities to tier 1 OEMs to municipalities. And what we've proven time and time again is our ability to endure in some of the country's most extreme and remote environments. And pictured here is actually one of our deployments in Detroit, charging up a Bollinger truck. And so primarily our origin was really focused on overcoming grid constraints at places like gas stations for light duty. But over the past couple of years, we've seen a significant influx of interest from medium and heavy duty operators who have some of the very same real world constraints. And so we've been very fortunate to work with a number of these partners. If we move to the next slide. So I want to talk about one specific example where we partnered very closely with a tier 1 OEM at a fleet research facility in the Mojave Desert. And so some of the key characteristics of this site were that they actually had an existing 30 kilowatt fast charger, but it was defunct. The provider of that EVSC left the North America market and basically left them without any continuing support and maintenance. And so they already had this pre-approved connection, but being that they were, in the process of doing lots of constant cycling of high performance EVs, they wanted to ensure that they would be able to make the most of their existing grid infrastructure. They were at the time quoted, 2+ years from SoCal Edison to basically make those upgrades. And so that was not tenable for their test plan. And so they not only wanted to have a lot of cycling, they wanted to do this in a very extreme environment where they often see triple-digit temperatures. I'm guessing in Massachusetts that's not as common, but you never know. If we move to the next slide. So a little bit about Electric Fish. In our product, we've developed the 350 squared, which is fitting under that semi-permanent palletized categorization that Madeline had shared earlier. This is a system that is very easy to deploy with the site's existing grid. We can work very flexibly with 480, 240, 208 without needing to prompt or require transformer upgrades. Each system comes loaded with a 400 kilowatt hour battery storage system that is flexibly enabled to, of course, do fleet charging up to 350 kW, but it also has the capability to provide backup power and also monetize grid services, which in a market like Massachusetts can be quite lucrative when we think about programs like the Clean Peak standard and also connected solutions. The power electronics themselves, we have liquid cooled cables that are able to dispense up to 200 kW simultaneously, or if one port is being used, up to 350. This is equivalent to up to 950 volts that we're able to serve. And we've designed these systems in a very elegant, intuitive container design that's very easy to both transport and also retransport as needed. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we're based in the Bay Area in a town called San Carlos, pretty close to SFO. We are BABA compliant, and you can see very easily here how easy it was to just transport. If you move to the next slide, please. And so this was a site where, again, they were looking at potentially 2 years plus of installation effort when you consider interconnection and also construction and trenching that would need to be done in this pretty remote area that's pretty hard to service. And so what we ended up doing was partnering with the client's preferred electrician partner, Tower Electric. We have a basically train the trainer model where we're able to very flexibly work with your preferred electrician vendors. And we were able to complete installation in just 2 hours. As you can see here, we didn't even need to install a concrete pad. The system is very much ruggedized for very diverse scenarios. We have definitely in the past, we definitely have the flexibility to deploy on concrete pad sorts of formats, but in this case, we just set the system securely and safely on desert gravel. And the installation effort itself, taking 2 hours only costs $500. And so the reason being we were able to effectively repurpose this defunct charger from EVBox and just connect it into our system. If you move on to the next slide, please. So yeah, this is an image featuring, the dual port charging where we're seeing, 200 kW delivered on both up to 200 delivered on both vehicles. And it's really just a testament to how simple and seamless the deployment was in such a grid constrained location. Next slide, please. So just a little bit more technical in terms of specs and KPIs that we achieved. So we were deployed at this site for just over 3.5 months, given that this was the temporary window that the customer was looking at basically delivering this constant cycling window. And so we saw a peak of 279 kilowatts delivered, and then also a max of 87 kilowatt hours delivered in a single session. Across the entire window, we saw 7.4 megawatt hours delivered across both fast charging and grid services. And we also saw 99% plus uptime in an environment where we very consistently saw consecutive 100-degree plus days. And this, we credit to the innovative design around our liquid-cooled cables and battery technology. We have both options for air-cooled and liquid-cooled. Next slide, please. Drilling a bit more into the actual quantitative benefits of what we achieved. So again, this was a project that otherwise, might have taken multiple years to complete. We were able to do it in a couple of weeks. And a couple of weeks also includes things like shipping and shipping and build. But as we saw, the actual installation itself only took a couple of hours. In terms of the budget, we were, operating on a basically short-term lease structure through an innovation program. And we saw that we were able to save significant amounts of budget. This is sort of underestimating what we think are the equivalent DC fast charging costs, the grid upgrade costs, construction and install. But I think very interestingly and significantly, we were also able to save a significant ongoing OpEx. When we think about the demand charge reductions, we were able to save on an ongoing basis. This was analyzed based on their historical energy consumption and also their tariffs relative to what we were able to achieve and actually save them for their ongoing DCFC costs during that lease period. Next slide, please. Each system has a very intuitive dashboard that allows you to visualize what's going on in terms of state of charge of the system, individual sessions. You can have the ability to customize the rates that you set, whether for pricing or for grid power. Each system also has multiple heat sensors enabled that then produce and yield thermal plots that can allow you to visualize temperatures inside the system. There is an optional advertisement screen as well that we're able to provide as part of the real estate of the system. Next slide, please. We've heard a lot of feedback around the EV charging experience where there's so many apps and yeah, it's really not intuitive. So what we tried to do instead was we developed this arcade style almost interface where all you do is press a couple of buttons and then tap if you are enabling a payment experience. If there's no payment experience, you can very easily use authenticated cards or key fobs that we can provide that basically allow you to transact and complete the charging session. But basically, it's quite intuitive and there's no app required. Next slide. So those are that was a deep dive into one specific use case. We've done a number of other very temporary use cases, including Burning Man this year and Burning Man decompression. We're partners with the Burning Man project who will be producing a separate case study, which I can share once that's released in the coming weeks. But we also have additional deployments where we've done projects with municipalities and utilities where it's meant to be more of that permanent sort of setup. But if you do change your mind or have a different location that's better suited, there is that flexibility to move. And we often do have customers that operate on leased lots, for instance, in dense city centers where having that amount of that level of flexibility is key. So I'll leave it there for now, but happy to take any questions that you all have. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much to our panelists. We are now at the Q&A stage of this webinar, and I will hand it over to Devin.
Hi, everybody. So I'm the program manager that runs the mobile charging program at Mass CEC. And so just wanted to give everyone a heads up that Madeline will have to leave a few minutes early. So if you have questions for her, did Charity? No, she's still there. So if you have questions for her, please type them in now. For now, we can start with the first question, which is, what are some of the major challenges for mobile charging adoption? And why are some fleet owners hesitant or resistant? And Madeline, I will kick it to you first.
Sorry, just fighting my screen. So what are some of the major challenges for adoption and why might some owners be hesitant or resistant? We've seen a variety of responses, and it's neat because even where fleets might have similar challenges, the different contexts in which those fleets operate can really distinguish one's needs from the next. One fleet in particular that we're excited to be engaging has a commercial business with a leased property, and they're at this stage of trying to figure out if an electric vehicle will fit their duty cycle. They can't find out if an electric vehicle is going to work for them without mobile charging because they're in a leased facility. In another location, there's a leased facility where folks had access to funding, so that it wasn't necessarily a financial barrier, but they're moving facilities to another leased facility. So they're looking for a solution that can go with them. Cost absolutely can be a barrier. We recognize that, and we're grateful for programs like the Mass CEC pilot making it financially feasible. Something that I've been hearing from OEMs is there's a big desire to achieve cost parity with public charging. There may be a fleet that has electric vehicles, but is having to go charge at public schools. That's a real scenario we have. So not only is it disrupting their duty cycles, they're having to pay those public charging costs. So mobile charging is going to bring that cost down for them, save on personnel hours. So it really is across the board, but there are really unique ways to solve those challenges. Let's see. I think that captured it. There's kind of the qualitative hesitation of folks don't know if it's going to work for them, or wariness towards something new. Change is hard, but then also finance can be challenging as well.
I can give one anecdotal experience from a couple of years back. And I think this complements a lot of what Madeline just shared. We were one of two finalists in a municipality's RFP for their police fleet, where they were looking for battery-backed flexible charging. So it could have been mobile, could have been something that could be relocated, especially during emergency periods and like wildfire season in California. But as we were waiting to hear back from the RFP, they decided to suspend the RFP and ultimately withdrew the RFP because their vehicle inventory forecasts had shifted radically after additional inputs. This is typically the thing you would want to address, with a partner like CalSTART proactively, but they actually decided that they wanted to move away from one vehicle OEM to another. And based on cost and that second OEM's availability, they would need to shift their whole procurement timeline. So I think this is all more the reason why it's ideal to have a lot of the chicken and egg sort of factors playing out with a partner that can provide the right guidance.
If I could add from the Exos standpoint, I would say funding and incentives, site power, and permitting have been some major obstacles or just like complicating factors. So funding and incentives for a system like this, not everybody is thinking about this. It's great that HVIP program and Mass CEC, I think they're sort of like forerunners in this space, really thinking about and seeing the value of this type of unique solution. But there are a lot of established incentive programs that are like, wait, it's on wheels or it's mobile. It's not going to stay in our service territory. We don't want to fund that. Like we don't know that it's going to stay put. So there's just like some inflexibility there. Site power, that's specific to our particular solution, right? Like if there is no site power there, it just complicates things. You have to go take it somewhere else to charge it back up or something like that, or you have to pair it with a power generation system. But that's not true for all of the mobile solutions, obviously. And then finally, permitting is a tricky one because permitting can be really different from place to place. Sometimes you don't need a permit to install a mobile charging station. Other times, the utility will take the stance of like, hey, if you're going to plug it into the grid and it's got energy storage, we want to know about it. So it can be really different. It can be like you don't have to do anything to actually you have to do quite a bit. And so those can be added considerations.
Great. Thank you all for your answers. I think this is going to be in a similar vein, Alden, to what you were just speaking about. But the next question is, how important is the income from programs like the Clean Peak Standard or Connected Solutions? Without those programs, does the math still pencil out?
I can take that since I'm the one who I think brought up those two programs in my presentation. So I would say it all really depends on utilization. I would say, we've talked in the past with some school bus fleet operators, for instance, who aren't using those vehicles all year. And so there is potential for, those down periods to actually repurpose for other ancillary services to continue monetizing. But, it's with these programs, you're not actually needing to trade off the power that you deliver to the fleet versus to the grid. It's many of them are demand response driven. So if you do have a large enough battery storage integration, just by conducting your business as usual charging operations, you'd still be able to generate additional income just for doing what you're already doing and not compromising power availability. And this is especially, a nice bonus during, I think, summer and winter are typically when you see the highest spikes in these incentives. But I would say they're more of a nice to have than a requirement for most fleets. We offer it with part of our solution because we do have those capabilities already enabled with how our software works and our grid interactivity. But yeah, I think the bread and butter to look at is really like the fleet's own utilization and making sure that's served and then adding the grid ancillary services on top. Happy to chat about that further.
I think I would add by just asking a question to the question, right? Like when we say, does the math pencil out? It's like compared to what? There is a cost of doing nothing, right? Like you might have vehicles sitting around for a long period of time, months or years, not being able to be put into operation. That's a cost. The cost, compared to permanent chargers, like there's a lot of project costs. There's site engineering costs that you have to think about. There's the cost of that equipment too, right? And then I think like when you shift away from thinking about cost, it's like thinking about value. Like what could a mobile charging or semi-permanent charging solution do that your regular chargers can't do? If you have a vehicle that dies in the field, electric vehicle that loses charge in the field, it's actually pretty expensive to tow that back. It's because of regenerative braking. You can't tow EVs as easily. Being able to take a mobile charger out, charge it back up, get it back to the field. Now you've just saved a bunch of costs, right? So I think that question, I often pull the thread on that a little bit and try to understand like what are we comparing it to? And then thinking about like what is all the value that you're going to get from a flexible solution like this?
I've got one other consideration to add. I'm not familiar with these particular standards or cost solutions, but an additional consideration that we had learned as the program manager with a fleet is that their concern was the amount of personnel time it was costing them to take their dozen fleet vehicles out at the start of the day to have them drive to the gas station to fuel up the vehicles. And then I don't mean to pick on their employees, but if you're stopping at a gas station, maybe somebody's grabbing a snack, maybe somebody's using the restroom, and all of that paid time adds up as well compared to if somebody is able to show up at work, hop in their vehicle and get on the road. So there are a lot of different equations we can use to do that math. I have to jump for another mobile charging presentation, so thank you all for being my warm up this morning. Please feel free to email me at mbrown@calstart.org. I would be happy to visit with folks about mobile or semi-permanent charging.
Great. Thanks, Madeline.
Thank you.
All right, we have one last question, which we have 3 minutes to answer. So I'll ask that we kind of do a little quick. So the last question is, which mobile solutions require interconnection and which don't?
Happy to jump in first. I think more than the solution, it's more I think about the site. So I think there are some sites where it was always intended for like temporary setup. So for instance, film shoots, for instance, might have their own temporary permits for setting up a site, or festivals, places like Burning Man, for example. And so, you're not needing interconnection in those cases. I think if you have more of a grid-tied solution, which our solution is able to support as well, depending on how long you plan to be there, so the line between semi-permanent and permanent can get a little blurry. So it's important to be very upfront and clear with your HJ about the actual timeline that you plan to deploy. So for things like 6 to 12 months, we've had a lot of success with tapping into smaller load sorts of interconnections, and with even shorter deployments, we've been able to work hand in hand with HJs to basically go through alternative methods.
Great. Alden, do you have anything to add, or?
I think Vince captured it really well. I think it's this question of like, is this your ongoing solution, or is it something that you're deploying on a temporary basis at a particular site or something like that? Like with the hub, if you're just tying it into an existing DC fast charger, probably don't need any sort of interconnection. If you're going to have it connected to like your distribution panel at your site on an ongoing basis, probably something where you want to talk to your authority having jurisdiction there.
Perfect. Well, thank you both for everything today. We really appreciate it. We're just going to let Claire wrap us up with this last slide, if you like, Claire.
Sure thing. Yeah. Thanks to our panelists and everyone joining us today. Like I mentioned earlier, our first 2 webinar sessions on mobile charging manufacturers. Those materials are live on our webpage if you missed them. And coming soon in the spring 2026, we'll have a final session for this series as an update from our fleets participating in our mobile charging pilot program. So stay tuned for more details on that. But otherwise, thanks for joining us, and we will end here.
Thanks, everyone. Have a nice day.